Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the 2026 The Side by Side Footy Show. I am Coach Cody and today we will be going over my predictions for the AFL 2026 season ladder. Let's get right into it. So there's a lot to talk about this year. A lot of teams that have changed around, a lot of new recruits, a lot of recruits leaving teams. There are some obvious teams that you kind of expect to finish in certain positions, and there's a reason for that. But let's get right into it. Starting with 18th position, I've got the West Coast Eagles. I think it's really hard to look past them finishing bottom of the ladder and getting that wooden spoon. I've got them finishing on 0 wins. I'm sure they're going to pick up at least a win or two throughout the season. But I've got, according to my own prediction, I just don't see them winning many games. There were a couple of games that could have gone either way. I think I was very kind to one team just a little bit more. But again, I was going through it round by round and just going over it. And I had West Coast finishing with 0 wins for the year. Obviously, that leaves them with a really low percentage of 76.6. The West Coast Eagles, really hard to look past them as the bottom team. They've recruited well in the offseason with the draftees and everything, but still a long way away from it. And next up in 17th spot, I've got the Tigers. Now, I was really sort of looking between Richmond and Melbourne, and there was another team as well that just finished slightly above those two. But I've gone with Richmond. I've got them down for 3 wins with a percentage of 83.1. I think they're going to show improvements, no doubt. They did win quite a few games, a lot more than people expected last year, but I just think the competition this year is so tight. I can see them finishing maybe one position higher at 16th, but it's going to be very hard to see them finishing too much higher than that. Maybe 15th at absolute most if the teams that I think are going to really struggle this season just fall off the ramps basically completely and capitulate. But I've got the Tigers in 17th. Moving on to 16th place, I've got Melbourne Demons. Now, they have recruited Myercheck from the Magpies, and as much as that hurts to lose a player like him, has been such a good player for us over the years. I think they'll benefit from having someone like him in the forward line. They kind of needed someone like him in that forward line. They've kind of struggled with only having Van Rooyen up there, and it's he's not young now, but is a lot younger as a key forward. You kind of need that experience. So I think it's exactly what they need. But will they reap the rewards of that this season? And obviously with a new coach and a lot of changes in the club and stuff like that, I think it's going to be quite a long year for the D's. They will be winning games. I've got them down for 3 wins, the same as Richmond. So only about 4% separating the Tigers and the D's. So I do think these two can flip around. But I've got the D's finishing with 3 wins and a percentage of 87.7. Moving on to 15th, I've got the Bombers. Now, the Bombers could be a surprise package because they do look like they're setting up well, but I think they still need one more year before they're starting to push for that 12, 11 position where they're just on the brink. So obviously still a young list, still a very exciting list. They were able to retain Merritt, which could be very, very important for them. The highest I can really see them finishing is maybe, 13th, something like that. I just don't think they've got the list right now, and so many other teams are just so far ahead at the moment. But I've got them finishing 15th with 5 wins and a percentage of 86.6. Moving on to 14th spot, I've got Port Adelaide. Now, I do think Port easily, to me, could finish 17th. I really can see them just sort of having a really tough year, but they still got Butters for that extra year before he goes on in the free agency and stuff like that. And they still have some quality players in that team. I just think, it's going to be all about how the coach goes, how he sets him up. Can he, make the most of what he's got? Is he able to really kind of change things around? Hinkley really reached his limit with the team, and I think that was time for him to go. But I think it's right now, Port are kind of heading towards the dip. So I don't see them finishing much higher than 14th, to be honest. With 5 wins as well, same as Essendon. So those bottom 5 teams, in my opinion, you can, other than West Coast, you can genuinely flip most of them around, and but I'm expecting those teams to finish towards that end of the table. Moving on to 13th now, I've got the Blues, Carlton, the old enemy, with 7 wins and a percentage of 91%. The Blues, I do think they could finish one spot higher than that, but obviously losing Kono is massive for them. Losing De Koning is is instrumental. I think people will underestimate just how important he is to them, as much as Curnow. And obviously Curnow tipped towards the end, but I think Curnow will find a resurgence. And anyway, besides Curnow, look, the Blues, I think they're kind of entering a period where there's a lot of excitement. You know, they've won both of their preseason games so far as of recording this, against Brisbane and against the Cats. So they did beat the two grand finals of last year. Granted, this preseason, so you can't read too much into that. But there are good signs that there's a bit of energy, and obviously a lot of recruits from the Curnow trade and everything else. So they did lose some players, but they did gain some players. Obviously, Jagger Smith back from injury. I can see them pushing for 12th. Very hard to see them past 11th, but I don't think they're going to be as free fall as people think. I do think they'll still finish towards the upper side of the ladder, but I've got them in 13th. And then next up, I've got North Melbourne in 12th. Now, this one, I'm kind of like, I was a bit maybe too kind for them. I've given them 10 wins with a percentage of 93%. I do think North and Carlton can switch and likely will, but I just think right now North, you know, I mean, Wardlow's just been injured recently, but I just think they've got, now this is the season where they just got to take that next step, and it's not about making finals. It's just about dragging themselves off the complete bottom of the ladder. They did show some good form towards the end of last season. So I do expect them to improve, and you know there'll be a lot of circumstances in terms of, you know, injuries or players, and they've got a lot of young players and stuff like that, but a lot of it also comes down to the other teams around them. Like, there's just so many good sides this season, and I do think a lot of teams will step up this season. Last year, it felt like, aside from the top 8 and obviously the Dogs, there wasn't teams that really were doing much. But now this year, it's like, you know, bottom 5 for me, or bottom 6, are the teams that probably, you know, won't get anywhere near the top 10 as finals, which is now the change. But yeah, I think the Blues will, the Kangas will go all right. Don't think them finishing much higher than that. But yeah, I think it's pretty good. And I think they'll kind of, you know, it'll be like a domino effect of like they're just building towards getting better and getting closer and closer to finals. Next year, I think they'll be on the brink. And the year after that is when I think you really got to look out for North, if they can keep their players and everything. And Clarkson's still on and still invested. And yeah, you got to look out for them, but not as of yet. I've got them in 12th. Next up, 11th, I've got the Saints. Now, this one, I really don't know how I feel about it, because I feel like Saints can sneak into the top 10, as they're calling it now, but as in finals. But I just think that with all their recruits, as good as their recruits are, and they've signed some amazing recruits. Like, you've got your De Konings, you've got your Liam Ryan, who'll go way under the radar. Obviously, Silvani as well, and you know, they managed to hold on to Wangan and Miller. Like, it's good signs for the Saints. It's great signs, and I do see them no doubt pushing for the final spot, whether that's a wild card or whether that's the top 8, and they could easily probably make it if they're really just hitting their stride. But I just think that with the new team and adjusting to the system that Ross Lyon plays and everything, it will take time. But they've shown great signs last season, and I can very easily see them sneaking back into finals again. And yeah, I've got them down for 13 wins, so they just miss out by you know, basically one win from the position above, which I'll get into. But yeah, I've got them finishing with 13 wins and a percentage of 103.4. A valiant effort, and very easily could see them sneaking in. But I just think maybe they'll win that 1 year. Like, I can easily see them going from finishing 11th this year, and then 2027 as far as top 5. So it won't take very long for them to really get it, and they could hit that form towards the end of the season. And if other teams are struggling around them, they can pick up enough points. But I think they'll just still need that little bit of time. But moving on, now we've got the top 10 now. So these are the teams that are going to make finals, to include the wildcard rounds, obviously. But in 10th position, I've got the Swans. I think the Swans, signing Charlie Curnow is massive. Like, just huge for them. Exactly what they've needed in that forward line to kind of complement what they've got around. It allows Heaney to spend more time in the midfield. Goulden is not injured. So if everyone stays healthy and fit, Warner signed on, obviously, and Amadi's still there. And now Amadi's got that Curnow back up, and they've got some other players as well that can fill in that role. And I just think right now, you know, they weren't not that long ago where they were competing in finals, in a grand final, right? So I just think that they had that dip last season, and I think this year I'm really expecting them to sort of have that momentum and the energy behind getting Kerner in, and especially if he gets off to a good start and kicks a lot of goals and stuff like that. I just think they're gonna be able to push themselves where they're a little bit more ready compared to St Kilda. And so I've got them finishing with 14 wins and 104.3 percentage, just about in 10th spot. I can see them lifting back up. I don't think they can make top 8, but I definitely think they can get that wild card round position. In 9th spot, I've got the Western Bulldogs. Last season, finishing 9th meant they missed out. This season, it could mean that they are in, although albeit it'll be wild card. So having said that, I think the Dogs, I've got them finishing with 14 wins and 105.8 percentage. So all in all, look, the Dogs, they're just the biggest issue with them is their best can contend with anyone on their day, but the problem is always been consistency, and whether or not they find that. Obviously they lost Jamarra Goldhagen, he didn't really play last year, but whether or not maybe Sam Darcy can step up a little bit more and kind of he's got a few years under his belt now in the system and he'll be ready to take that step up. But I just think there's a lot of consistency issues, not just with the players, but with the coach and the strategy. And, when you win and when things are going your way, it looks good. But when things aren't going their way, there's no adjustment. There's no tactical sort of change or anything. And that's the problem for the Dogs. And that's always been the problem for them, is to maintain that consistency when required across the whole season plus finals. But having said that, 9th now means you're in the wild card round, and anything can happen when as long as you're in, and finals just becomes a whole different season in itself, and that's going to be very, very important, I think, this year. So we've got the Dogs finishing in 9th spot. Moving on to the top 8 in 8th spot now. So 7th to 10th are all going to play in the wild card round. So these are all teams that technically in finals, but they aren't in a qualifying or elimination final. So they're just hoping to get into the main final, sort of. So in 8th position, I've got the Crows. I think Adelaide will finish with 15 wins and a percentage of 107.5. Percentage doesn't really matter, but it will matter towards the end. But obviously, you just don't know how much team, even if by some miracle I get these predictions right, you just don't know what the percentage is going to be. So it'll alter. But I've got the Crows finishing 8th. I think, last season, look, they look pretty good, but I do think they were overall pretty lucky to finish in 1st, and it just didn't really reflect where they were at. And I do think there's steps that they can take this season to improve, and those couple of recruits that they got last season now sort of settling in, and the team structure and the game plan and everything, and they'll feel a lot of confidence after last season that they can sort of back up performances, maybe not finish as high up as the latter. Because there's just so many teams right now contending for the top, the top 4 and stuff like that. But definitely think they're good enough to make the 8 at their best. So I've got them in 8th position. Next up, I've got my Magpies, Collingwood, finishing in 7th with 15 wins as well and a percentage of 107.9. That's a 0.4 difference percentage. Either way, we will be playing the wildcard round according to my prediction. What can I say about the Pies? I can do a whole video about Collingwood, and I can be hopeful and say that we can genuinely finish as high as 4th or 5th maybe, but I just think losing my check and sort of, I'm expecting next season, if we do get Ben King, to really be that sort of confidence boost that we need. But obviously last season for Pendles, so we're going to go all out for it. And we've still got some upfield issues with Bobby Hill, and to start the season we are not going to have Howe and Moore for the first couple of games, I think, at least. So we are going to be missing them, and that'll probably hurt our chances of getting that top 4 spot. But I don't think that's what it's about. I think, over the last few years, you're kind of seeing it's not about holding that top spot across the home and away season. It's about just finding your form towards the end of the season right before finals. So then when final hits, hopefully if you've got any injuries, your players are back, everyone's ready to go. And then you hit your form in finals. And, last season, a lot of people would say it was Geelong or Collingwood for most of the, towards the end of the season. But Brisbane just came out of nowhere and they just hit the form at the right time and, won the flag. So I think we'll finish 7th. I could be optimistic. I could also see us dropping further than that, maybe even out of the top 10. But I just think we've got a great coach and a good system and, an exciting player now. And Buller, obviously, who's just come in, and he's the sort of the hope really to back up McStay and be able to do a job for us. And you just don't know what's going to happen. But I've got the Pies in 7th. I think that's a humble enough sort of prediction. And there are some games where I was like, oh yeah, we'll probably lose that game, and just, I was more on the cautious side of like, okay, don't just be biased. But the Pies have got us finishing 7th. Moving up to 6th spot, again with 15 wins. I've got the GWS Giants, 15 wins and a percentage of 108.8. Giants really sort of, I mean, I wouldn't say disappointing because they had a decent season. I just think the way it ended was really disappointing with how they got out, basically. But I just think there's so much quality in that team, like absolutely so much quality, and it could be a mental thing with the Giants in terms of finishing higher up or finishing lower, but I just think where they're at right now at the moment, compared to the other teams on top of them now, I just think they're sitting right. I can see them finishing 5th, maybe finishing 4th if the likes of Geelong or Freo just don't really have decisions that I think they're going to have, but. Yeah, I think 6th spot is pretty fair, and that means they're into a qualifying final, no wildcard rounds for them, so that's good news, I guess. But yeah, the Giants in 6th spot. Moving on to 5th, I've got none other than the Cats. Geelong, grand finals last season in a very disappointing grand final performance. Did so well the whole year and just kind of just dropped off in that last game, and it's so hard to not say the Cats are going to be up there again. They're just always going to show up, and they've got Warple now in that midfield as well, which is really, really helpful. And a lot of players that are raring to go, and I think they'll bounce back. I don't think they're going to finish, outside of top 5 at all. Could see them, as high up as maybe 3rd, but I think 5th spot or maybe 4th is about the sort of right spot for them. But I've got them down for 15 wins and 112.3. So from 5th to 8th, basically the top 8, I've got all finishing on 15 wins. So it's going to be really, really tight in that area, I think. But yeah, the Cats at 5th, I think that's fair. Moving on to 4th, I do have the Freo Dockers. Now, Freo, I don't know what to expect with them. I really don't, because I didn't really rate them all that much last season. I thought they were good. I just didn't think they were good enough. But based on the game by game fixture, I think it's a lot of the fixtures kind of suits them. A lot of home games, that kind of thing, and stuff like that. So I do think they're going to have a really, really good season. They've just got such a good team. It's on paper, it's a very, very solid side, and it's you could argue it is a top 4 side across the board. So very solid, stable team from front to back, and obviously now they've got big Mason Cox up there, which will help in the ruck, and then Jackson can spend more time in the midfield, which is looking like a thing that's going to be happening. But again, I can see them finishing maybe as low as 7th, but I think the 4th or 5th is probably the likely sort of spot for them. But I've had them in 4th with 16 wins and a 108.4 percentage. Moving on to 3rd position, we're just rippling right through these, by the way. Moving on to the 3rd spot, finishing in 3rd, Gold Coast Suns. I've got them finishing with 18 wins and 111.8 percentage. Gold Coast, I mean, they've gone and recruited Petrarca. Jamarra Ugle-Hagan is up there as well. And if he stays healthy and fit and mentally sharp and ready to go, on paper, this is easily a top 2 team. But I just don't have them top 2 because I don't think they're quite there yet. Pretty favourable draw, if I'm honest. I looked at the fixture and I was like, yeah, they're going to win a lot of games. They've got a lot of home games, good home games against tough teams, and that's always an advantage for teams like that where, their home games are basically wins. So I do think they're going to show more consistency. The fact they won a final last year in the first finals is a good indicator of where they're actually at and how good they are. And so the fact that they've recruited Petrarca and Jamarra Ugle-Hagan to add to the players that they have, it's a stack list. It really is. And they've got a great coach and a premiership winning coach, who knows what to do, is a proven coach. I think they'll finish up in 3rd, probably where they should be sitting. Following that, finishing in 2nd and 1st, just so we don't have any spoilers. Finishing in 2nd, we've got the Brisbane Lions. I've got them down for 19 wins and 120.9 percentage. And that obviously leaves Hawthorn finishing in 1st spot with 20 wins and 118.2. Now, I know, starting with Brisbane, it's just hard to look past Brisbane, man. They've signed Sam Draper now. Oscar Allen's in there. Yes, the Lockenhill stuff is happening, but I just think he's going to probably just put his head down, be a professional, and just sort of focus on his footy, and that's very dangerous for the rest of the comp when Lachie Neale is focusing on his footy. So, things can obviously fall off the ramps, but it's just too stacked of a team from top to bottom, such a top side, and very easily can see them going back to back to back. And that's just the way it goes with Brisbane, really. They've just been on fire, honestly. And deserving premiers last year, you can argue probably came out of nowhere, but overall, when you just look at it from the list perspective, just a top list. Very hard to not see them win it. I can very easily see them finishing first. I might have just given them like one loss here and there, where it could have just gone either way. But had they had won that, they would have had a better percentage anyway than Hawthorn finishing first. So I do think Hawthorn will be the minor premiers this season, even though they did not get their man in Zach Merritt, and they lost Warple, and Will Day is out injured. I just think Hawthorn this year I think the top 2 is almost guaranteed for the Hawks this season. I was really surprised that last year they didn't get that, but I just think now another year under the belt, another deep September run, they're going to look really, really good. And I just think a lot of players now, if they can, losing Will Day is going to be really painful for them, and not having Warple and not having Zach Merritt come in afterwards, like it's a mess in that area. But I just think all over the ground, they've got covers, right? They've got players that can come in and do a job, and they might drop a little bit more because of that, but I just think that they've got a really great system. A lot of good players. Forward line is great. Back line is just top elite. So I do think the Hawks will surprise, if not surprise, and in my opinion, I think a lot of people think, they'll probably finish top 4, but not first. But I do think top 2 is probably where they're sitting at. First and second, to me, can flip around, but I've just, decided to go with the Hawks based on the fixture list. So that's it. That's the ladder predictions. Now I'm happy to move on from this and go straight into the finals based on this ladder prediction. So let's get right into that as well. Well, here we are transitioning into the finals. Now, according to my prediction of the ladder, these are the teams that are set to go head to head at the start. So in the wildcard round, we've got my Magpies against the Sydney Swans and the Crows against the Bulldogs. Now, starting with the first game, Collingwood, Sydney, I do think, I might be very biased in saying this. I do think the Pies will get it done on the day. I think, the finals sort of run that we've had has been pretty decent. When we do make finals, we've been pretty good. Home game as well is going to be massive for us as well. And the Swans, I think, Curnow, does he show up in September? That's going to be a big question. It's going to be asked of him. But I think the Swans this year will look at it as a big step forward. But I do think the Pies will get it done in the end. The Crows and the Bulldogs, Allied home game. It's going to be tough to kind of pick between these two. But again, I think Crows are just a more consistent side. Up at Adelaide Oval, the Crows don't want to lose another final and basically exit at the very start. So I think the Crows will get it done there. Moving on to the qualifying final between the Hawks and the Freo Dockers. I think this one's pretty straightforward. Home game for the Hawks. Hawks will get it done. Moving on to the Cats and the Crows. Home game for Geelong and elimination final. I think the Cats will get it done. Unfortunately for Adelaide, they will not be tasting the semi-finals, and technically with a top 8 final, they still have not won the final. So according to my prediction. Anyway, moving forward to the second elimination final, we've got the Giants and the Pies. Ooh, this one would be up at the Giants' land. Look, I think the Giants, they're a very good side, and because it's the elimination final, I don't think they're going to lose this. And it pains me to say this. I can see us going all the way, no doubt. I'll always have the faith and hope and belief that we can turn it on, but you just don't know what's going to happen. Can see us winning, no doubt, but I'm going to have to go with the Giants for this one. Unfortunately, knocking the Pies out. I do think 2027 is going to be, especially if we can get Ben King, is going to be the year where we're going to be able to contend for the flag again. I think this year it's more about just staying in finals and staying around the top positions where we're contending against the best team. But maybe this year just not going to be enough. But you never know. You never know. I'll always be hopeful. So, but I'm trying to keep it as realistic as possible. Giants do tend to beat us at their ground as well. So yeah, moving on. Second qualifying final between the Lions and the Suns. This one might be tougher than people think. Lions can afford to lose that, honestly, but I don't think they will. I think the Lions will win that one. sending them straight to the prelim once again. Freo and Geelong, that's a very interesting semi-final. I do think Freo would actually win that one. I just think the Cats usually Freo do beat them up there, and I can see the Cats easily winning it. It just kind of depends on their form, injuries, and stuff like that. But home game for Freo. Freo are as good as I think they're gonna be, and I said that last year, and they weren't that good. But I think they have to take that next step. Well, I think this is the season where it's sort of make a break for their coach, Longmuir. Like, I just think he has to get it right this season, otherwise they're in big trouble. So I'm gonna tip him in for a prelim appearance, which I think all in all would be a pretty successful way of looking at the season for them. Next up, Gold Coast Giants. I think the Suns will win that one at home. It's just going to be hard to tip against them. Next up, we've got the Hawks and the Suns. This will be a prelim at the MCG. I think the Hawks will get the job done there. The Lions and Freo. This is where it ends for Freo, and it's going to be a Hawthorn Lions grand final, according to my prediction. The top two, first against second. Damn. You know what? It's funny because Hawthorn didn't get merit. If this was the case and Hawthorn had gotten merit, I think their midfield would have been enough. But against the Lions, midfield, even though it's at the MCG, they're going to eat them alive. I think the Lions are going to go back to back and win the flag once again. I mean, it's just become a norm at this point, but I think they're good enough. I think everyone knows they're more than good enough, especially with their signings as well now to add on top of a already stacked list. But that's it for me. That is the first episode of the Side by Side Footy Show for 2026. Now, obviously, it's kind of Collingwood focused, but I also just talk about footy in general. There'll be more content hopefully coming out. I'm kind of excited for this season. I tend to start well and then kind of drop off, but I'm looking forward to hopefully just committing to it more this season, invested in the green screen and everything else and whatnot. So looking forward to the season. Expect more content with AFL, obviously, even about soccer with Melbourne Victory, Arsenal, that kind of thing, and even some gaming in there, streaming and actually, releasing gaming series as well. But it's all talk for now, but I'm looking forward to getting started for the year, and hopefully we have a good year, not just in footy, but in everything else. So God bless. Hope you're all well, and take care of yourself. Good day.